Assemblymember, we are live.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am so thrilled to have so many people joining us this evening. I am Laura Friedman, and I am the Assembly member for the 44th Assembly District in Los Angeles. I want to welcome all of you to our State of the Industry Forum. We have over 1,300 people RSVP'd for this forum tonight, and many, many more will be watching it later on streaming platforms. And that just shows how much interest there is in what's happening now in the film industry. We have an amazing set of participants today to come and share with us their perspectives on the state of our industry. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I spent over 20 years in the film industry as a producer and development executive. I started out my career in New York City, working for 4 years for different film companies, including for HBO, back in the pre-streaming days, back in the basic cable days when HBO was an interesting alternative to the studio system for people who were looking maybe to make a little bit less money, but do something with a little bit more artistic freedom. And over the years as a film executive and TV executive, I went from a landscape where producers made movies of the week that they owned, and TV stations paid license fees. I worked for first-run syndication companies. I worked in the studio system where I was a development executive for one of the dozens of producers that had deals with the studios on the different film lots around Los Angeles. I watched as reality television took over for quite a while, the airwaves, leading to a lot of people who did long form content having to figure out something else to do. I've watched different waves of different types of productions. But I've also watched over the years a lot of consolidation, a lot of change in the industry that has been disruptive to people who are working in it for long periods of time. But it's nothing like what we're seeing now, with really rapid changes to the way productions are financed, to where productions are shot. And that is leading, of course, to a lot of anxiety within the industry. And that's why we are doing this town hall today. As you know, California was early to be one of the first film and tax credit offering states in the country. Prior to that, we were losing a lot of production here in Los Angeles to other countries like Canada. And so California did step up with a film tax credit. Now, I myself have co-authored and supported every film and tax credit extension that's been before me in the legislature. And I'm also very passionate about protecting film industry and TV industry workers and their likenesses and their creative content. This year, I was a principal co-author of AB 2602, a bill that requires talent to have access to a union rep or a lawyer before signing a contract that might allow the ongoing use of that artist's likeness to better enable the artist to negotiate for compensation for that ongoing use. And when the industry workers were fighting to reach new bargaining agreements last year, I co-authored SB 799, which was a bill to allow striking workers to access unemployment benefits, which was unfortunately vetoed by the governor. I was also a joint author of AB 1017, a bill to provide housing support benefit to allow striking workers to access no interest or low interest loans to hold on to their housing if they were out on strike. When COVID hit in 2020, I worked with IATSE on urgent legislation to allow workers to borrow from their retirement accounts without any penalties to help families make it through the shutdowns. Throughout the pandemic, my office also held forums, much like tonight's, to assist industry workers in obtaining unemployment assistance. Now, I know that EDD and unemployment insurance was really challenging to many of us in the industry because we work in non-traditional ways, and EDD just wasn't used to or prepared for dealing with claims from people who are working in more untraditional type jobs. And I know how frustrating it was for the public. It was frustrating for me in my office as well. We were on hold with EDD for days at a time, just like you were. But I'm happy to say that over time, we did get EDD to become more flexible and change how they were doing their benefits. And now we are again in very turbulent times. So let me introduce our amazing panelists of experts who are going to talk to us about what they see on the horizon and what we should all prepare for and what we can do to help the industry that we love. And before I introduce them, I will just reiterate that I came to Los Angeles in 1992 for a job at Paramount Pictures after working for 4 years in New York City. My husband was a film editor. My friends and neighbors were mostly in the industry, and I know what this industry means, not just to the economic viability of Los Angeles, but to Los Angeles's identity. It's what makes Hollywood, Hollywood. So there are all kinds of reasons in the world that I will fight like heck to make sure that the industry stays here in LA and that it stays healthy. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have this panel here today. So our panelists are going to tonight are Carrie Wood Feinerson, the Executive Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy from SAG-AFTRA, Toby Bays, who's the business agent from IATSE, affiliated property craft persons, IATSE Local 44, Jeanette Moreno-King, President of IATSE 839, the Animation Guild, Carla Diaz-Sales, Deputy Director of the California Film Commission, and Melissa Patak, Vice President, State Government Affairs for the Motion Picture Association, the MPAA. And now I would like to turn it over to Carrie to introduce herself and maybe say a few words before we go to some questions.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Carrie Wood Enertson. I'm the Executive Director of Government Affairs at SAG-AFTRA, as the Assembly member mentioned, and I'm thrilled to be here. We're very thrilled to be included in this important forum. We have many, many members in your district Assembly member, and just excited to be part of it. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for being here. So, Carrie, I know that there are a lot of obstacles facing the industry right now, and I'm wondering what you and what SAG-AFTRA sees as the greatest obstacles or challenges that your members particularly are facing and running into.
Sure. So I think I'm probably a good person on this panel to address the issue of AI, which is sort of like the big elephant in the room that everybody, is sort of talking about. And, we were fortunate, we were able to get some critical guardrails in place in our bargaining last year. And, AI was a big tenet of the strike, as everybody knows. And we really held out for this. We got some good language in our agreement that never been in there before. Consent and compensation around the use of someone's digital replica. That's the term we use to talk about somebody's own image, likeness, or voice. And we feel it's very important for our members to have these protections of their digital self, their digital image, their voice, their likeness, how it's used, and to provide consent for that. So we sort of shifted. We were able to get some great guardrails in the contract, and then we shifted to the law. And thank you again for your support. Governor Newsom just signed 2 of our bills last week in our headquarters in LA. You mentioned AB 2602. That deals with, again, informed consent for the use of a digital replica, and AB 1836, which is Assembly member Bauer Kahan, dealing with replicas of deceased performers. So now we have these protections in the California law for performers who are both living and deceased. So we are thrilled about this. It's one thing to have something in the contract, but it's another thing to have it in the law. So we've also been working really hard across the country. We've gotten similar bills signed in Illinois, Tennessee, soon, hopefully in New York. And we're also pushing at the federal level with a bill that we helped to craft, part of a big industry coalition, including employers, the recording industry, called the No Fakes Act. So we are really pushing also in Washington to get this, sort of a federal intellectual property right in place to protect the image, voice, image, and likeness of all people, and particularly performers.
Great, thank you. And just a little bit of housekeeping for folks that have joined us on the Zoom. We are monitoring the Q&A that's going to my staff, and they are going through those questions and sending me questions. We've had dozens and dozens of questions come in over the past several days, and we are looking at the questions that have been repeated by different people. Primarily, there's a lot of questions where we've gotten multiple versions of the same kind of question. We're leaving about 15 minutes at the end for those questions, and I'll be asking those of the panelists. So keep those questions coming. And if there are questions that you have for specific people that we're not able to get to, because we do, as I said, have hundreds and hundreds of participants, we're going to try to get those questions to each of the panelists, and they'll be able to answer you directly if you give us your contact information. So just want to let you know that we're going to try to at least get you an answer later if you have very specific questions. Carrie, what further changes would you like to see that you think will help to revitalize the industry in California, that would be helpful to keep jobs here and, of course, to keep your members employed throughout the year?
Sure, sure. So just a little facts. We have about 80,000 members who live in the state of California. Many of them, Assembly member, reside in your district. We are going to be pushing really hard to strengthen our incentive program, and we are trying to get the message out to legislators in Sacramento that we really need to be competitive. You know, people saw the LA Times article this week. In order to keep the industry here and thriving, we really need some strong incentives. You know, there could be local level, state level, potentially the federal level as well. But, you know, we're going to be hammering away to get this message to legislators, and always appreciate your help. And I know you've been instrumental in the past. But we really need legislators to understand that the incentive is a huge part of keeping work here in the state. And, you know, we don't just have members in LA. We have a local in San Diego and a local in San Francisco, and it's a statewide program. So that's very important for us as well.
Yeah, when I was talking to a lot of my colleagues about the film tax credit extension, I was surprised at how much resistance there was from some members who didn't seem to understand the economics of the industry, how easy it is for these jobs to be sent, you know, out of the state or out of the country, you know, often not jobs that people here in California will end up being able to get or compete for. And just also sometimes a lack of understanding at how integral the industry really is for the economic health of Los Angeles and for tourism, and understanding how all that's connected. I think that sometimes the industry for the outside world puts up a great front, right? That Hollywood's here in LA and this is where the whole industry is, but we know that the reality is a little more complicated than that. Yeah. And maybe we've sung, you know, tooted our own horn a little too much, and people don't realize sometimes that it's possible that if we don't do things right, that we could lose a lot of production, a lot of the job centers. So speaking of LA specifically, what kind of advice do you give young actors, singers, writers, and talent when they're coming here? You know, I hear it all the time. I have people who contact me and say, my son is just leaving school and he wants to be an actor, or he, you know, wants to be a director, and he's coming to LA. And, you know, what should he do? How can he go and get his big break? What should they be doing? What advice would you give?
Well, the first thing is to join the union, of course, right? Join SAG-AFTRA, which there's some qualifying and whatnot to do. But once you're in the union, we have multiple local committees, national committees. We also have a conservatory that I just want to mention that offers workshops and classes for young actors who are looking to get that kind of thing. So we offer a lot of that internally. But externally, I mean, I would say, you know, the things we're all thinking about: build your network, take classes, you know, get it. And again, within the union, you can really build your network among fellow actors, but just, you know, and also have a very versatile portfolio, you know, have multiple things that you can do or audition for, and audition as much as possible. I mean, you know, that's sort of the general stuff, but we do our part here to help actors as much as we can.
Well, thank you, Carrie. We're going to move now to Toby Bays from IATSE Local 44. Toby, would you like to introduce yourself to folks?
Thank you. Yeah, Toby Bays. I'm a 44 member now for 28 years. I also sit on the board of the California IATSE Council, which is our legislative lobbying group that contains representatives all throughout from IA through California. And I've been in this business agent capacity since 2019. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
Great. Thank you so much. So you represent, I think, more than 168,000 workers in art, media, entertainment, carpenters, animators. It's a really wide range of different craft people across all of the different IATSE locals. My husband was an IATSE member when he was an editor. Your workforce is very vast, it's very diverse, which means that whenever the industry changes, your workers are very heavily impacted, and maybe even in different sectors at different times. So I'm wondering right now what you are seeing. Are there certain sectors where we're seeing more of an impact than others?
Yeah, just correction. There's 168,000 in North America. I represent 44, which is about 7,000 members strong. And in the area of Hollywood or film and television workers in California, we're about 55,000 strong in that area. So The areas that we've been impacted, I think it's been very bleak, to be honest. For many of our members, they were just recovering from the pandemic and the impact those economics had on them. Going into it, we saw a little bit of a dip in production, which we were anticipating at the very last quarter of 2022. And then we had the labor stoppage, and that in combination with what we were already predicting with was going to be a bit of a drawback in streaming production is just an element of what some people have been seeing well over 14, 15 months of unemployment. And in a freelance world, those economics are hit and miss. For some people, it's been not nearly as impactful, but for the most part, I think our members, especially the ones that have been in for a long time, have not seen anything quite like this before. Even when you go back to 2007, when we had very similar circumstances of labor stop and an economic turn in the, nationwide, this just feels and is different, no doubt. We had recently the trustees of our health plan allowed a one-time withdrawal of the IAP, which is a employer-funded 401k, for lack of better explanation. And in less than a little over 24 hours, we've had 2,200 applications. And this is to basically make sure they don't default on their mortgages for essentials. And that was shocking, to be honest. And I think it was across the trustees. I don't think anybody quite anticipated the demand for that one-time IAP withdrawal. That we've been doing a lot to shore up the healthcare coverage for our members by providing premium-free COBRA. I think we did that for almost 14 months before we've had to end that in August. But that just shows you we've needed 14 months of additional coverage to help our members shore up their healthcare for their families. And in that and all combination, it has been an emotional impact, a financial impact, a serious hardship for many of our members. So, and
how much of an impact has AI made? I'm assuming that the fact that there's more green screens now, there's less sets being built, that's had a big impact. But have some of those workers sort of moved laterally over into the tech jobs that do that, or is this what's happened to all those folks?
Well, yeah, CGI has had a presence for a long time now. We don't really know what the AI impact's going to be, at least for many of the on production or off production workers. So we're likely to see that sort of rollout in the next 3-4 years. What came out of bargaining was very clear that both sides know this is coming, but how it's going to impact directly is still unknown. There's still a lot of issues that need to be hammered out as far as intellectual property, copyright. It's very difficult to sort of wrap your mind around all that, but they have some very serious concerns on their part. We certainly do too. Though to what Carrie said in their bargaining, I think we got some very good language that really puts our finger on the button of AI, so to speak. When it comes to our members, it will be our work. We've had technological changes in our industry, and we have been able to manage and maneuver with it. And it has changed the way we do things. Just digital really has made it possible for production to leave so easily now out of the state. So that's a technological change that has come and gone and is here now, and nobody remembers it different when it was different. So
we have a bunch of questions about if you have an idea of what percentage of your workforce is physically working right now, and do you have any sense that post-strike, that as projects are being sort of uncorked, that there's any ramp up of production for your members? And also there was a question about whether you're accepting new members given the current slowdown, or and do senior members get priority, or veteran members, or is it just kind of a free-for-all when new people come into the union?
Yeah, it is. We don't have a seniority system So when you're a member, you have access to the same jobs as somebody who's been a veteran. We do have new members coming in. There's nothing that we can legally do to stop members, right? There's a lot of law that supports the fact that if you've qualified, you get to join. And so, but it is very, it has turned down quite a bit. It's only trickling in. And I think a lot of people that coming in are probably reevaluating whether they want to step in right now. So, and fair enough. We've never really had those issues. People were always willing to come in, but I think a lot of people have maybe taken a minute and see how this all pans out. The other questions were about, if you can remind me.
If you have a sense of what percentage right now are working compared to normal, I'd say, compared to, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago, and whether you're seeing any uptick post-strike at this point.
I'm saying we're probably around 65% working. If you average that out, you really can't compare the numbers to last year. 22, you could, and we're probably, 25 to 30% from 22 numbers. But overall, compared if you 5-year averaged out, it's going to be about, we're down 35%. And again, that's not been even across, right? Some people have seen really prolonged amount of unemployment. That's just due to the freelance nature of the industry too. It's unavoidable to a certain degree. So,
well, let me ask you the same question that I asked Carrie. What would you like to see? What can policymakers do? What can be done to bring more production back to the state? Do you have a list of action items that you think will be helpful to get people working more again?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to echo what Carrie said, we needed really an aggressive incentive. We're really working from an incentive that went into, I think in 2014, it's 10 years old. It's 330 million each year. That hasn't grown. It hasn't increased with inflation. And then when you comparison to what's happened in New York, they're coming in at 700 million a year, and yet they probably have 1/8 the workforce in place that we do, right? And that's really what we need to measure up. If we're going to be competitive, if we're serious about preserving this industry, and we should, if anybody, I mean, I hope if the silver lining of what happened during that work stoppage was to see how the impact of this industry to this state. Billions and billions of lost wages, benefits that went out. And these are good jobs. These are good paying jobs with good benefits and pensions. And that's what we should be looking out for and protecting. And so I think really we have to go and do a full court press on getting incentives. And I'd also see at a local level to see some of the cities within the county also kind of loosen up a little bit on the restrictions. And really sort of be more inviting in some of those production areas that neighbor and within the Los Angeles County would be a nice incentive to see that kind of happen and sort of a new embrace of the industry that's been so important and is iconic to this state.
That's great. Well, thank you. And we're going to come back to you and to everyone else because we have so many really great questions coming in. So thank you. Next, we have Jeanette Moreno-King, who is the president of IATSE 839, the Animation Guild. Maybe a little bit of different issues, maybe not. Animation is a pretty unique corner of the industry. So I am wondering, given what you've just heard from your colleagues, if there are any issues that are unique to animators?
First off, hi, my name is I'm the president of 839. I'm also a member of 839. I've been a member for at least 20 years. The years get away from me. I'm a director in adult animated comedy series. So I've done a lot of like Fox primetime shows and Netflix shows. So I'm very intimately aware of what our issues are. So as far as I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Well, and so we've just heard about, some of the struggles that the industry in general is having with productions out of state, with the work stoppage. I'm wondering if there's anything that's unique to animation that is challenging to your membership that we haven't heard from the other speakers.
Outsourcing has exploded. with the studios looking to shrink their budgets to make up for the overspending during the streaming war. And there are two main things that are affecting our workforce, and whether jobs stay in LA. The first one is outsourcing, and the second one is AI, and that's more like potential into the future, although there are some productions that do use some of it. So I'll go into the outsourcing. Our crews are shrinking. Animation was usually a pretty stable type of job. We had it was, you're working in an office and you're working with a team of people. Animated shows and animated features can take a long time to finish. So it was very steady work. Our budgets tend to be a lot lower than live action productions. So a lot of those tax incentives, usually the tiers that they have for the tax incentives haven't included us in the past. So with the outsourcing, starting in the 80s, they started outsourcing different levels of production. So animation early on started being outsourced, with keeping like more of the pre-production here, like storyboarding, writing, design. So what's happening is that's shifting, where more and more of the pre-production is going out because everybody's in search of these really attractive tax incentives that are in other countries. So we are being affected by the same thing that our live action brethren are. The thing that's really the most painful, though, is that some of these foreign productions reach back into LA to hire our own members, because our union doesn't have a wall. You can work union or non-union. And our members are very desperate for work. Some of them have been out of work for 2 years now and trying to string freelance jobs together. So these like foreign vendor studios are reaching out to our members to hire them away for their jobs, but the wages are like a half to a quarter of what they would normally get paid. So it's actually doing like wage depression and it's lowering wages all around. The AI is a little bit more an unknown right now, as Toby was saying, because right now it's in the testing phase, and we're not quite sure exactly yet what's coming, but it is one component of the shrinking of budgets. That makes any sense.
And then do you feel like animators are left out of the conversation when it comes to film tax credit and other incentives? Or do you feel included and seen?
No, well, the tax incentive that Toby mentioned that has been around in California for 10 years now, animation is not included in that. Animation productions have not been included in that. And the level of California has a cap, right, on that tax incentive. It's like 330 million, which is fairly low. That can be a budget for an entire production, where Georgia is unlimited. And I'm not arguing that we should have that, but a little bit more competitive would be a great thing. So yeah, animation, even though our work started getting outsourced in the 80s, nothing was being done about it. And it's slowly been eroding that type of production in LA.
Is there anything else that you hear from your members that's frustrating that you think policymakers can address? I mean, clearly making sure that the tax credit has a bigger slice for animation, includes animation. But beyond that, is there anything else that you hear from your members that as a source of frustration right now?
Just the awareness, mostly. A lot of people, I think, general public, they're not in the weeds with us. So I think it's important to know that this is a solid middle-class life. We're not buying yachts. This is, we can live in California, which is like, it's getting harder and harder because rents are going up, and everything's going up. But this has been a really solid middle class job that a lot of people have been able to build their lives on and have their families. There's a lot of legacy families in animation where their parents were worked in animation. And my daughter wants to go into animation, and I feel like it's my obligation to make sure that this industry survives in LA. Disney is in LA. Disney created animation in LA. It needs to stay here. We have reached national recognition through the IA. So we do have a few studios outside of Los Angeles that we have organized. So with that, I think it would be great if we had incentives at every level, local, state, and national, because this entertainment industry is a big part of our culture, our outward facing culture. And I think people need to value it. There's this misconception that everybody that works in entertainment is like rolling in the dough and living the high life. And that is not the case.
Well, great. Thank you so much. We're going to bring you back after our next speakers. Next, we have Carla Diaz-Sales, who's the Deputy Director of the California Film Commission. So Carla, if you'd like to just briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll get to some questions for you. We've got a lot of questions for you and for the other panelists at the end.
Wonderful. Thank you, Assembly Member. Yes, Carla Diaz-Sales with the California Film Commission. I'm the Deputy Director, and the Film Commission really has programs like the tax incentive that's already been discussed a lot by our previous panelists. We also do permitting for all state-owned buildings, parks, roads. Additionally, we provide production affairs services for productions to really try to facilitate production on the ground once a production chooses to film here. And apologies in advance, I lost my voice, so I'm trying to get by.
No problem at all. So we've talked a lot about the film tax credit. Can you tell us a bit about how you have justified that in the past? What does the industry actually bring to California? How do you quantify the value?
Absolutely. And I think you're hearing again from a lot of the other panelists in terms of some of that intrinsic value to the workers that work here. But in terms of economic benefit, and we had a study that was done by the LA EDC a couple years back and really looked at the last iteration of the program and found that the program in its 5 years has 21.9 billion in economic output. It's a projected amount of 110,000 jobs. And in terms of every tax dollar that's invested, it really brings back $24.40 in terms of output, $16.14 in terms of GDP, $8.60 in wages, $1.07 comes back to state and local tax revenue. So I think we have seen time and time through all of these years that it really does have this incredible economic value in addition to the jobs that it creates both directly and indirectly, serving a lot of the local California businesses, the local workers, and all of the entertainment-based economy that really supports this industry throughout the state. So the impact is huge.
And how many productions are taking advantage of the tax credit? And do you feel that there are changes that are needed? We've certainly heard about expanding it, making it more lucrative, but are there any other changes that you would advocate for?
Sure. So, taking that question in two parts. The first part in terms of how many projects are in the program. To date this year, we started off with 70 productions that were on force majeure. So coming out of the labor disruptions last year, 70 productions were put on hold. And of those, 38 of them moved forward. So we had those productions starting to work to get back between January and really June, trying to figure out scheduling. In addition, we can continue to have several film allocation windows. We've announced about 51 projects to date. That's both television and feature films. Our most recent announcement was just last week with 15 new projects, feature film projects coming to California. So we're happy to continue to work with productions who want to be here, get the word out, and try to get those jobs and try to get those productions to stay here. In terms of your second question, in terms of improvements, we hear every day from our partners and stakeholders on the challenges that they experience. With animation, we've been working with Jeanette and her team, and we heard from several animators at our June Film Commission board meeting about the impact of the animation jobs leaving the state, just as an example, but truly have heard from many stakeholders, from workers to studios, of some of the challenges they experience. And we're really trying to put that together and bring that information back so that we can try to figure out, what can we do today at the Film Commission to address some of these things in the short term, and what are some of these long-term ideas that we're hearing from our partners that really could make California more competitive. And I think you've heard some of those ideas from the other panelists.
We have a question about small stop motion animation studios and whether those are those and other types of sort of more, I guess, more niche productions. Are they thought of at all in film tax credit, or is it really geared towards just the big behemoth, tentpole studio films?
It's a really good question, Assembly Member. I think that the evolution of the program itself is worth noting. When the program was first created in 2009, it was $100 million. It was a lottery system, and it was really intended to try to go after some of those productions that at the time we were seeing starting to leave. So some of the bigger productions, the most notable changes then came in 2014 when it was expanded from 100 million to 330 million, which, as you've already heard, is the same amount that we're at today. And in that time, expanded some of the categories somewhat to make sure that we were capturing, independents of different sizes. But the program was initially created to focus on those that were leaving. And I think, at the time, when it was created, those animation jobs were not in that category. As we, continue to see, the industry is changing and evolving. And I think that that's where, we're really taking note, and we're, again, hearing directly from folks in the industry every single day about some of those challenges. And frankly, this is where it's going to take a long, strategic conversation with partners throughout the state, with the governor, who's always been a supporter of this work, to really think through how we take all this information, how we partner with everyone, and how we figure out how to move it forward.
The LA Times, when they've been covering some of the issues facing production, pointed to what some location managers and others felt were just kind of either fees that were too high to shoot locally, or just bureaucracy, things that made California more difficult for location productions than other places in the country. Is the Film Commission talking about that at all? Just ways of streamlining production, making it easier. One of the things that was suggested to me at one point, for instance, was, as some of the productions want to be greener, about that it might be good to have generators, having electrical conduits that productions could tie into in frequently filmed locations, so they don't have to bring generators, diesel generators on site. I'm just wondering whether there's a task force or talk about this, and whether there's investment into just things that would make production managers and productions lives so much easier that they want to stay home to take advantage of them.
It's a great question, and it's actually something that we work in our teams every day to discuss. I run, our permit team. We have 3 permit coordinators, a permit manager, myself. We're looking every day at some of the challenges that our productions experience on location, and that's really looking directly even with our own state properties. In addition to that, we partner with over 60 film commissions throughout the state, local jurisdictions that are great partners and really truly thought partners around what we can do to make filming easier, to really think through some of those processes. We're very open. I hear from location managers on a daily basis when they have ideas. They're not shy about reaching out, and I appreciate that so deeply, because it really helps us from the position where we sit at the Film Commission as a statewide organization to then partner with some of those local entities where maybe they're experiencing that problem more directly, or bring that back, to our own state partners and say, how can we take this? How can we make this easier? How can we, make California filming really a top priority for all of our partners throughout the state, like we know that it is for us. So it is something that we look at every single day. But, I think, of course, we're always going to run into, the costs, inflation, costs of filming. And I think, this is where I'm seeing a lot of creativity around local jurisdictions that are doing studies that are trying to think through, even from their standpoint, they don't have that tax incentive lever to pull. So what are the other levers that local jurisdictions can pull, again, to facilitate production? And we're happy to be partners in that work.
So is there real talk, right? I understand that everyone wants to expand the film tax credit. Is there active discussion around expanding it, expanding it more aggressively, number one? And do you feel that you're able to make any headway? I mean, I can just say from my perspective as being part of the film tax credit conversation last year, that there were times where I thought we wouldn't get it at all.
Yeah.
It was not an easy thing, unfortunately. But do you feel like now that we have this extension that we are in a position of expanding it? And if so, is there actual discussion about expanding it to have unique incentives for animators, for musicians, for commercials, for music videos, for parts of the industry that is part of the industry but not included in the tax credit program?
Yeah, I think that that's a complicated question, to be honest. Um, on the one hand, I think, we're trying to do our part here at the Film Commission to try to raise the issues that again, we're hearing directly from our stakeholders. We had some really great presentations at our June board meeting from, folks on what others are doing and ways that we can make ourselves more competitive. So I do think it's something that, we know is a problem and that we're working internally to try to figure out, you know, how do we address it? How do we address it within the context of the budget shortfalls that the state is currently experiencing? So I do think, that's what makes it a tough conversation. But, there's the other piece that a lot of folks really still think that this is a program that doesn't impact the whole state, when many of us know it does. I mean, even just working with all the film commissions around the state that we do, we really see how productions, can come and film in Shasta County or come down to San Diego County and the impacts that they have. But I don't necessarily know that all that everyone knows what those impacts are. And I think that that's something that we could all do a better job of really educating at all levels, truly. I think about it even from the education we do with our state departments on why this work is important. I think that's something that we can all be doing so that when the conversation does come around, like it did last year, and we are able to work on that, more directly, that we are ready and we've done the work, through education, talking about the impact, and frankly, all the things that, we're hearing all of our partners on this town hall talk about of all the various things that we need to work on.
And do you feel that City of LA and the other nearby municipalities are taking seriously the accusation we've heard from some in the industry that the fees are too high, that the hurdles are too difficult, that it's just too much of a headache to shoot in LA? Do you feel that our local governmental partners are hearing that? And if so, are they changing anything?
I really do. I've had the opportunity to join Mayor Bass's entertainment task force here in Los Angeles. And even just, in the short time that she's created this task force, hearing about how she wants to really think through some of exactly what you're talking about, what the city of Los Angeles can do. I know Film LA is a really great partner in that work, really trying to kind of figure out what can we do at all junctures. I mean, we get calls all the time at the Film Commission asking for help, and this is where, even though these are not our local jurisdictions, we're happy to make a call. We're happy to reach out to any of our local jurisdiction partners, and they're always very receptive. And I think one of the encouraging pieces is I'm starting to hear from more cities who don't currently have filming, trying to raise their hand and say, how can we be film friendly? What can we do to attract filming? Like, how can we help? And I think that really shows how serious people are really taking the fact that there are multiple different things that we can do. Of course, we talk about the tax incentive program, but there really are some things that can be done at a very local level. And I do think folks are really hearing that and really trying to, to really make an impact in those spaces.
Thank you. And just because we've had some questions about it, people have asked who in Sacramento reviews film tax credit? And if people wanted to advocate for making changes, how would that happen? When does the current extension expire? When will the legislature be taking up tax credit again?
Sure. So the legislator took up the tax credit just last year.
Yep.
Well, the governor, it was the first time the governor has actually put the tax credit extension in his budget. So it was extended, signed into law last July. That extension is a 5-year extension. It goes into effect next July. So July 1st, we will go into the 4.0 program. That is a 5-year program. So it will go through the end of June 2031. So that extension has happened. With that said, legislators, talk about the program regularly, and we've seen, throughout the years, in 2021, there was the addition of a soundstage program, which was brand new, came to us, through a member who had a great idea. So I do think that there are legislators who have ideas and bring them, and, we're always here as a partner to be helpful however we can to our legislative partners. But that extension was put into the governor's budget last year, and he really did champion wanting to extend that. And again, wanting to really make sure that there is a 5-year commitment to the program to make sure that message was sent.
And so
last
that
year.
people, and I think what you said is really important, that what the legislature does, it can change and it can undo. So it is always possible for there to be additions to the program, for it to grow. I know people have asked, how do we advocate? How do we help? The way that the process works is that there are various committees that would see any legislation around, let's say, a change to the tax credit or an addition. So there is a committee that I used to sit on that's called Arts, Entertainment, Sports, and Tourism. They are one of the committees that would see any change or addition to film tax credit. Then it would also go, I believe, to the Rev and Tax committees, and this is in both houses, in the Senate and the Assembly. And then finally, it would go through the Budget Committee, and that's really the most kind of important place. You have budget subcommittees that would be the first group that would hear it, and then it would go to the larger Budget Committee, and then it would have to go to the legislature and be part of the budget process, which happens in the first quarter of every year. So yes, a legislator could introduce additions this year or going into next year or the year after, and then it would have to go through those various committees. So there is quite a process, and it's always difficult to add things that would take money away from other parts of the budget, because it's a finite piece of pie that you're cutting up, and it's hard to do in difficult budget years. But if we have upturns and we have more money in the economy, there's certainly opportunities then, I believe, to try to expand the tax credit. And I do believe it should be expanded. And so I would, I think that LA should be aggressive about this, and the industry and all the unions should be aggressive about trying to get more as more becomes available, because as we heard, it does become a multiplier. And I know that people have asked for that report that show how much the tax credit does impact and grow in the local economy. And for those who are interested, if you reach out directly to panelists, I'm sure that they can get that report to you as well, to Carla or others. So thank you, Carla. We're going to now move to our last panelist before we move, to a more general Q&A. And we are really lucky to have the MPAA represented here today with Melissa Patak, who is a really incredible fighter for the industry. I've worked with her for many years, and there is no one who cares more about the industry than Melissa. So thank you so much for being here. Now, I know that SAG-AFTRA and WGA, as we heard, did sign new bargaining agreements last year, and everyone was very excited to get back to work. And I'm wondering what that looks like from your perspective at the moment. Are we seeing any kind of a ramp up? Are we expecting a ramp up? Do we expect more productions to start coming online and more people to get back to work here in California?
Well, Assemblymember, first of all, thank you so much for convening this group and putting all these panels together. It has been very informative to hear my colleagues and partners on this really important topic. So to answer your question, it's a bigger issue than just that question. I don't think our industry has had a quote unquote normal year in probably 5 years. 2020, we faced the pandemic and we went from lots of production to zero production. We worked really hard, everybody in the industry, to figure out how to come back safely, and we started to ramp back up. Streaming exploded, and there was a huge demand for original content because people wanted to stay home and watch their favorite programs. And the industry created lots of new programs. And then we had disruption last year, and we went again back to zero. We had a double strike. We haven't had one of those since 1960, two of the guilds on strike. Very important issues that had to be resolved, both which Carrie talked about, are AI, digital replicas, but there were also financial issues, the stability of the health plan and the pension plan. We were experiencing inflation, so wages had to be addressed, so really complicated negotiations. And yes, after a long ordeal, everybody came together and those strikes were settled, which we were very, very grateful for. But there were more union negotiations this year in 2024, and I think everybody was a little bit on pins and needles. The IA had comprehensive negotiations, the Teamsters had comprehensive negotiations, and luckily, while they were hard-fought negotiations, they did not result in any more strikes or work stoppages, but there was uncertainty. So I think we're now finally in a period where we can say there is stability, and I think, yes, things are coming back. Will they be to the heights that we had? There was something that some people refer to as peak TV. That was sort of the explosion of streaming. I think there is a recognition that peak TV was an unprecedented amount of content, and that there is a bit of a leveling off. But that is to say, there's still more production, more content, more original storytelling that is appearing on large screens and big screens than there was 10 years ago. There's still much more content, but we have had a really an unprecedented 4 or 5 year cycle that I don't think this industry, has experienced.
How is, this is something I wasn't thinking of asking until just now, but in terms of those big screens, are we seeing people going back to the theaters? I'm old fashioned. I like seeing movies on a screen. I like seeing it on film that's projected, but we don't really have that so much anymore. But are people going back to the movies?
Well, we thought not. And then the summer of 2023 gave us two blockbusters, Barbie and Oppenheimer. And it showed that when there's compelling stories, people come to the movies in throngs and droves of people. This year, I think we've had Wolverines, Beetlejuice. I mean, we've had some really big successes also. So yes, when filmmakers tell compelling stories that really have to be experienced on the big screen, audiences turn out. So I think while there also has been disruption in the theater sector, I think the theater sector is here to stay. We've got to make it a compelling experience, right? To get people out of their homes, comfortable chairs, great food offerings, et cetera, to draw people away from the comfort of their own home.
Great. I'm going to ask you a film tax credit. So people have asked, is there from the employee point of view, from the IATSE worker point of view, that maybe there's an argument to be made for focusing more on medium-sized films and doing more of them than putting more money into just a few tentpole films? And is this something the MPAA thinks about or weighs in on when it comes to designing the film tax credit program?
So let's start with, it's a scarce resource. That is the amount that can be allocated to the tax credit program. That is a finite amount because of California's budget situation. And it is oversubscribed because while there is a lot of competition, and I can tell you about the programs all over the world and in other states, that's already been touched on. But people do want to stay here. Filmmakers, producers, studios, they want to stay here. So it's always oversubscribed. So the question is how are you going to make sure, the way the program was designed was to make sure that the projects with the biggest net jobs would be the ones that get the incentive. Again, because it's sort of, the old program, as somebody mentioned, was a lottery program. It was $100 million. put in your applications at the deadline, and a CHP officer stood in front of a big fishbowl and pulled numbers out of a fishbowl, right? That was not a great way to award projects. So when the state was able to put more money in the program, there was a rationalization of how are we going to make sure we get the state gets the best value for its investment. So yes, there is a place for medium-sized budgets. There is a set aside for independent projects, which are the lower budget projects, which are, there's a set aside and they compete against each other, not against the big tentpole movies. But that's why it skews toward bigger budget projects, because it's about the jobs ratio and which are the projects that are going to produce the most jobs to benefit the greatest good in California.
Thank you. So I want to ask a little bit about the U.S., not so much California, but just U.S. film and its ability to compete with international productions. Someone asked an interesting question, which is, why aren't films that are shot out of the U.S. taxed as imported goods? Or has the industry thought of sort of a tariff system? Is this something that would help keep production here for, foreign films, non-U.S. produced films?
All right, so we're going to get a little bit out of my area of expertise.
Sure.
There was, for a period of time, a small federal tax abatement. It was called Section 181 of the Internal Revenue Code. I believe it expired some years ago. There have been discussions on and off over the years. You're headed to Washington if everything goes, yes, I know we're fingers crossed, but it's all but given. But that may be a discussion for you and your new colleagues about, is there a place for some type of federal incentive? I mean, look to our neighbors in the north, Canada. There's a national incentive, a federal incentive, and then the provinces, equivalent to our states, have additional incentive, and they're stacked on top of each other. You get the national incentive, which is about 15 or 16% of your Canadian expenses, and then whatever British Columbia offers or Ontario, it's on top of. So they wind up being quite generous. So it is something perhaps you and your new colleagues can give some thought to.
Absolutely. We had the conversation we had with some of the union reps was really about California competing with other states. But from MPAA's perspective, you've got competition now. You've got incentives to take productions overseas. But there's other areas where the U.S. does not sort of have a level playing field with some of the other countries. And we've talked about copyright and some other issues. Can you maybe briefly talk about changes that you'd like to see at the federal level that would help keep the industry healthy here in the United States?
Yeah, so now we're getting really, I do state government affairs.
Okay.
So while I have a general knowledge, I know as Kerry referred to, we've partnered with SAG-AFTRA and the recording industry on the No Fakes bill, which would create a level playing field on the use and the guardrails around digital replicas. I know we're supporting that legislation. But when we get into the tax structure and all of that, we're definitely, it would be malpractice for me to begin
Sure.
to venture into that area. But you're right, there, the UK has, I can tell you generally, there are very competitive incentives in the UK, and recently in the last couple of years, it used to be just a film incentive, feature films, and they added on series, TV and streaming series in the UK. Australia is very competitive. And there's just a lot of choices. Places like the Czech Republic have medium-sized incentives, and there are just a lot of countries that have identified this as a device and a way and a sound investment to diversify their economies and create middle-class jobs.
So that's just, suffice it to say that we have competition in this industry from around the world. We are no longer the only country that can make great films. We see production happening. We have an internationalized industry. We have an industry where we have streaming that's happening all over the world. And all you have to do is turn on some of our streaming services to see that there's really high quality content in English or dubbed in other languages coming from around the world. So if we want to make sure that we keep the industry in the United States, and I am very biased, I want to keep the industry in California, that we have to be very aware of what other countries are doing and offering, and we have to be competitive.
Exactly. And our companies, again, the MPA is now our membership consists of the major motion picture studios. I'm proud to say that we now have added Amazon Prime, Amazon MGM is our 7th member, Disney, NBC Universal, Paramount, Sony, Warner Brothers, and Netflix. And they look to a global audience. So yes, we're producing internationally, but our audience is international. It's not just a domestic audience. We want those movies to succeed and those series to succeed all over the world. And likewise, we're now experiencing, content made abroad that is attracting our eyeballs, our attention as Americans.
Well, it sounds like, we can make this maybe a little bit more of a rosy story then, and say that there's opportunities with this internationalization because we have more eyeballs watching our content as well. So if we find that balance and work with partners around the world, it's also an opportunity to produce more content, to have the content that we produce be more lucrative, so that also keeps production healthy.
Exactly. I would agree completely.
Great. Well, that's a good happy note then to move to bring all the panelists forward. And I'm going to now try to ask some of the questions that we've been getting. And of course, we have a lot more questions that we can get answered, but I'm going to throw them out, and whoever wants to take a stab at them, feel free to just, go ahead and unmute yourselves and just answer if you'd like. Somebody asked a very practical question. If you've exhausted your unemployment, is there any office for industry workers to help them attain projects maybe out of state, or to sort of help people that are really struggling to find work that have exhausted their unemployment? Anyone?
Well, I'll just say that gets very complicated when you're working in other jurisdictions. And so I would talk to your business agent if you're local before you take any work outside of the state. That would be the best recommendation, because it's complicated both regarding the agreements and just transporting yourself is also an issue. Great.
Is there any movement right now to fully unionize reality television?
Well, interesting enough, we've come a long way with reality television. Often they show up very quickly and they're gone quickly. What I've noticed when coming out of COVID, it was the first projects that were up were the reality shows. But I think a lot of those reality shows have taken the incentives to New York, and they've gone to upper state New York, and they're sort of out of the eye of the purview of a lot of these unionized centers. So I think they're taking advantage of the tax incentives in other states to in areas that are more are not union friendly to produce.
So how is, from IATSE's point of view, I think, how is post-production being affected by outsourcing and globalization? Is that an area that's staying here in LA because we have so much post-production, so many facilities, or are we losing that along with other globalization?
Yeah, we're definitely losing that too. It is post-production is feeling it just like every other level of production is feeling it. Entire productions are going out. It's like from script all the way to delivery are leaving the country and the state.
Let me ask, something we've heard a lot of questions about, and I can ask maybe the different unions, and even Melissa, if you want to answer, is there anything that workers can do to prepare themselves to be more competitive? If you're out there and you're an actor, or you're an animator, or you're a craft person with IATSE, and maybe you're not working now, is there something you could be doing to make yourself more attractive, to productions or in the marketplace?
I'll take that. Toby, unless you want to jump in.
You both can answer. Well, we'll go from one to the next.
Go ahead, Jen.
I mean, yeah, just like with any kind of work downturn, the best thing to do is to make sure that you have that cushion, because our jobs are always so unpredictable. But the best thing to do is to take classes, to educate yourself, to explore like how your skills can translate to other types of jobs. Like animation, there's always animation in something like marketing, advertising, games, even school educational type stuff. And it's always good to try to keep up with the latest software that is available. Even, like any of the new emerging technologies. And it's good to kind of keep up with the business of it so that you can kind of try to predict which way things are going.
Yeah, and I'll quickly add to that. What we tell all the new members is be honest about your skill set, always be improving, and it's competitive. And you really do need to educate yourself and be as fully well-rounded as you possibly can. And that will basically get you to be above the rest, sort of.
And I'll ask everyone here who wants to answer, including Melissa. A lot of people are saying they want to advocate for the industry. They want to help advocate. I'm assuming for tax credit, for LA to be a better place to film, for all of the things that would help bring productions and keep productions here in LA. How can just individuals best be part of that? How can individuals advocate?
So everybody should be registered to vote, right? And you should know who your assembly member is and who your state senator is and who your city council member is, who your congressman or congresswoman is. And, again, California is a very populous state. And so our elected officials represent a lot of people. And every office runs a little bit differently, but you should be able to write a letter to your elected official. Sometimes you can get a meeting with your elected official. Certainly, if you belong to an organization like a union, their meeting, I don't want to put words in Toby or Jeanette's mouth, but they would regularly be meeting with elected officials. That's part of what they do. At the MPA, we meet. We're focused on our studios and the locations of the studios. Even though studios don't quote unquote vote, they employ a lot of people. And so we know who who is the elected official of the district that Universal is in, or Disney, or Sony Pictures in Culver City. And so we encourage the companies and the MPA to develop relationships with those elected officials. And then you can talk with them about what is on your mind and what your priorities are. That's citizen government and the right to petition the government. We think of what's in the First Amendment, right? The right of free speech, the right to practice your religion, and the right to petition your government. So those would be some very elementary things. Know who represents you.
And I will say the unions particularly are great advocates for the industry and for their members. I hear from all of these unions and more on a regular basis, and they are not shy about reaching out when they think that there's something they need to help their membership. And I'm not just saying that because they're on the screen here. I can tell you that I have met extensively with all of these folks. And when we did film tax credit, we had MPAA, we had the Film Commission, everybody was there kind of together in force, along with the Teamsters, who represent a lot of folks who work in the industry, to really be there to advocate for tax credit, for incentives, for people to take the industry in Sacramento, take the industry seriously, no matter where they represent in the state. Sometimes there is a disconnect between a member who may represent an area that's far from LA and not understanding the impact that the industry has on the coffers of the entire state. So it is important that when you go up and meet, it's not just meeting with people, with me, it's meeting with the members from Fresno, the members from Shasta, so that they know that we are one state and that the revenue goes into the whole state. So I absolutely agree that is, really important. So, and sometimes underestimated, that these decisions are being made by policymakers who are elected. If you're worried about, if you're a location manager and you think that it's difficult to shoot in some city that you want to shoot in, you've got members who live in that city who can literally walk into the city council meetings and speak during oral communications and talk about that, about the fact that The cafes would be filled with people during the day if there was production, if there was a shoot going on in that community. So there are definitely ways to advocate for all of the things that would, hopefully make it more attractive to shoot here. Someone asked, and I'll throw it out. Actually, I'm gonna read this question because I just think that this is a really well worded question. Whoever wrote it, good job. That is very similar to a lot of the questions we've been getting, and it's for everyone. So I'm going to give each of you a chance if you want to answer this. What is your honest assessment of the next 6 to 8 months? The mantra "Stay alive till 2025" has been shouted by many workers. Is this hope realistic? If 65% of people are working right now, what do you expect to be by the end of 2025? So I'm going to ask each of you. I know that, and listen, for those of you watching, no one here has a crystal ball. They just don't. I don't, and they don't. But I understand that the question is kind of, what is your honest and best assessment for those who are watching and wondering if it's worth maybe hanging on? I'll start with Toby because you're on.
Yeah, I'll go first.
So you're going first.
So I think it will improve slightly as we get through the end of the year. I think the assessments that we had in bargaining are going to be honest. I think we're looking at a 25% retraction from our numbers at the beginning of 2022, and I think that's what we're going to see for the next few years. That was even anticipated even before the labor stoppage and stuff, that we knew that retraction was happening in streaming. So I think that's an honest assessment of where we're going to be at in the next couple of years and throughout by the end of 2025.
Great. Who wants to go next? You don't have to answer it because I actually have one more I want to ask you each before the end.
I just want to, Assemblymember, go back on something Melissa said that I completely agree with, and I just want to hammer away at it, to call your elected officials, call your representatives in Sacramento. This is all about jobs, middle-class jobs, and it's not just about industry jobs. This is about the dry cleaners in those communities and the caterers, and this is the jobs for the entire state, the entire city. I mean, can't stress enough how much this is about middle-class jobs, and that's the message we need to get to the city and the state.
Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
I don't think entertainment's going to it's not going to go away. We're just in a lull. And as far as how long it takes, those are people way higher than us that are looking at the global economy to try to figure that out. My hope is by the beginning of next year, but I don't know.
Melissa, you want to take a crack?
I don't want to be too rosy, but we've weathered a lot of storms. The industry has gone through. The one thing that is certain is there's disruption, and we adapt. Whoever thought that you might actually watch video on this, right, on your phone, but people do. I see it, when you're on a United Airlines flight and they don't have a screen, they say your phone, your personal device is your entertainment, and they make a whole menu of movies and TV shows available. Just plug in your phone. So I think the picture it is promising, but I think Toby has a little bit of warning. We hit a height in the early 2020s, and so we're settling back to something a little bit more of a plateau. But we're dealing. This group talks about film and TV and streaming. There's a whole generation of content creators out there, and our children are watching video, high quality video on things like YouTube. I mean, Carrie, to your point about the digital replica bill, yes, we settled it in the contract, but all video is not consumed on, it's not all produced by the majors, right? There's content creators, and they're creating all sorts of stories in different forms, whether it's YouTube or TikTok. So there are there's lots going on, still only 24 hours in the day for people to consume all of this, but there's just, video games and music videos and so there's just a lot in this space. And I think people are just going to have to be on their toes about keeping up with their skills and developing relationships. This has always been a relationship-driven business, and keeping your networking going, and the like, training and networking.
Yeah, and that's the first time we have had TikTok mentioned on this panel. And as much as that may take eyeballs away, it also creates opportunities. I have a very good friend who's become a monetized TikTok sensation in her 80s. So they form, an actress who, and now has this whole renaissance because she has been making these amazing TikTok videos.
One thing that I wanted to mention is that the Animation Guild is in negotiations right now. We negotiate separately from our mother union, the larger IA. So there's a possibility that they're waiting for us to settle that negotiation. And some of our biggest issues are outsourcing and AI, getting an AI language in there that's specific to animation. So hopefully after that.
So I'm going to shoot one last question to you, which is going to be a rapid fire answer if you want, which came from the audience, which is, without explaining, you can just list the top 3 things you would like to see happen right now to reverse trends and to just help keep the industry healthy here in California. If you want to you can be one thing, it doesn't matter. I'm going to pick on Carrie first this time, I think, so started with Toby.
Maybe we could follow New York and double our incentive program.
I like it. Good one.
Yeah, let's invest in this industry, not take it for granted.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have to agree, more competitive incentive program.
Okay.
We really want to see our workers get back to work. I mean, ultimately, that's who we hear from daily. We want the projects here. We want to see more projects come to California. We want our workers to get back to work. So whatever it takes to do that.
Yeah, just like everyone else, the incentives, but make sure that it's tied to a percentage of the crew being in California and LA,
Great. Well, I want to thank every single person who tuned in tonight. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you walked away with maybe an action item, with some more knowledge that will help you as we all navigate this changing landscape. I want to thank our panelists, Carrie Wood from SAG-AFTRA, Toby Bays from IATSE Local 44, Jeanette Moreno-King from IATSE 839, Carla Diaz-Sales from the California Film Commission, and Melissa Patak from the MPA. Thank you all for making this, I think, one of the best town halls that I've done. I learned a lot. I feel fired up and ready to go and fight for this industry. So look forward to continuing to work with all of you and everybody who's been watching. Thanks, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you.